Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Magic Mics. We get started as we do each and every week by introducing my two co-hosts, Ruben Bressler
Oh, hi.
and Aaron Campbell.
Howdy.
Hi, and I'm your host, Evan Irwin, and we are going to walk through all of today's Magic topics that's been going over for the past week or so. First up, of course, would be we have a new format. We have a new standard. It's the first week, so it's always a little shaky, and there's probably some really awesome deck we haven't even seen yet or even heard about yet. There's a bunch of people doing some great deck building, but nothing's really kind of shaken out. I think the Pro Tour is really going to obviously shape things. But we do have an invitational this weekend, which is a really important tournament that I think, if somebody's going to pull out the tech, the amateurs of the world who aren't flying to Spain are certainly going to be there trying to make it happen. But one of the things that, of course, over the weekend was SCG Live. There was a lot of coverage, and I got to watch a whole bunch of it, so I got to really sort of take a look at the cool things that were happening. And there were just a ton of cool stuff. There was Todd Anderson's deck, which was the blue-red kind of madness tempo thing. It was great. Drownyard Temple is one of my favorite cards in the set, and it was great there. Absolutely fantastic. Westvale Abbey was all over the place. That card is bananas. Which led us to our humans decks. There were tons of humans decks. Those were great. Those are our new sort of aggro. There was way too much mono-red, I feel, about a year or so ago, and I think this is the correction that you're seeing when Wizards is like, yo, we're not gonna let you play with all the red burn spells all the time, always. Another bit was to go back around to Todd's deck. He was using Pyromancer's Goggles and Fall of the Titan, which was ridiculous. That card was insane and had that really awesome story that it used to be Avacyn's Judgment. It was, actually a playtest card for Avacyn's Judgment. Then it just became like the card to play instead of Avacyn's Judgment. Last two here. Tireless Tracker was amazing. That card broke out. Everybody freaking loved it. It was great, and I love to see it, and it was just a really cool mid-range green value card. It was terrific. And lastly, Ayli, Eternal Pilgrim, was in just a ton of different decks and was really rocking it. She saw some playback in, when there was the rally decks, but now she's really starting to kind of branch out into other decks, and we're starting to see the power of that 2-mana, 2/3 Death Touch.
Yeah,
Ruben?
I was, I'm sorry.
Aaron? Go for
No,
it.
you go first. You were there, Ruben.
I was. Yeah, I mean, this standard format's pretty sweet thus far, mostly because aggro's great. I love me an aggro deck, and I played the blue-white humans deck that was all over the place. Throughout the tournament, really, it overperformed, I think. And I think that the real reason is Declaration in Stone. When you give white unconditional, relatively cheap removal, backed up with pretty good 2/1s and lords, it's pretty dangerous. The last time we've seen anything on the power level even similar to Declaration in Stone was Path to Exile.
Wow.
And this is kind of similar in a way. You get the value attached to it slightly later than you do from Path, but obviously it's twice as expensive as Path also. But whenever you're being compared to Path to Exile, that's pretty high praise. And so when your aggro decks get to take care of giant idiots very easily, it definitely makes it a lot easier to play White Weenie. And that in concert with the quality of the anthems, Always Watching and Gideon, it was just a pleasure to play that deck all day. And so as we move forward in the format, it's good to have the target on the back of various white humans builds, because you know what you have to beat when you're a control deck. You know what you have to catch up to when you're sort of like the Bant Collected Company deck that ended up winning the Open. I think that it's important to have a good aggro deck of one kind or another, not overpowering, but certainly good, to be able to have something to build towards. Because when you're trying to build a control deck and there isn't an established metagame, it's kind of tough. So in a way, having humans be good is good for everybody.
Right, and
Good
so
for the food chain.
with now Declaration in Stone was absolutely everywhere. It was ridiculous. If you were playing white, you were playing that card 100% guaranteed. So they did put Envelop, also known as Invasive Surgery, into the set. This feels like one of those cards that they put in there in order to balance the fact that everybody in the mall is going to be playing with Declaration in Stone.
Yeah.
Counter target sorcery spell. If you got Delirium, then you get to get rid of all of their Declaration in Stones. That seems fantastic. So,
Yeah, That was certainly a card that was on my radar, and I think was on a lot of people's radars. You know, there were a lot of negates and effects like that, and also ways to be able to win the game when you can't remove your opponent's creatures, or at least have some other way to remove your opponent's creatures, or make your opponent's creatures irrelevant. Like the second place list had Griff's Boon, for example, to be able to fly over the opposition. The green-white humans decks, you know, Dromoka's command was a huge deal, being able to have access to Dromoka's command. So, you know, the human's mirror is certainly something to look at also. But, you know, Declaration Stone is just a spectacular card. Everyone should have a play set because it's going to be rare when to find a deck that doesn't want Declaration.
Aaron?
Yeah, you know, you said, Ruben, that Declaration reminds you of Path to Exile, and it actually reminds me of Sever the Bloodline, which we saw during the last Innistrad block, and it cost 3 and a black to do that. You named you named a creature, and then you removed all creatures with that same name.
You target a creature, and it removed them all with the same name. But yeah, same concept.
It's a similar effect though. That had a really hefty flashback cost. But you know, you were mentioning just the cost of Declaration in Stone, and it's obviously cheaper than Sever the Bloodline. And that was the first thing that I thought of. I was home most of the weekend, so I watched a lot of the coverage, and I was really impressed with the decks that I saw. I'm just happy to see decks that have concepts and themes. It's not just 4-color good stuff. It's not just things jammed in together. You know, you can look at a white deck and say that's a humans deck. Right. You can look at a Cryptolith Right deck and understand why it's called Cryptolith Right. You know, there weren't any decks with names where you were like, why is this named this? Or you weren't wondering what was in there. You could see a thread that tied all of these cards together, which really impressed me. The other thing that stood out to me is that there's definitely an Avacyn test in Standard now. Avacyn even saw play in Collected Company and can't even get her. Collected Company can't even get Avacyn, but they still made room for 2 to 3 copies of her. She was in the black-white Eldrazi decks. She was in the mono-white humans decks. She was in the white-blue humans decks. I think that if you are going to be playing in a Standard tournament going forward, you need to have a plan against Avacyn because she changes the game. And, you know, there are strategies now that are almost obsolete because of her. You know, Ojutai is really awkward because of her. You know, the ramp decks are kind of awkward now thanks to Declaration in Stone. You know, these cards are really changing the game, and I think that it's a challenge, but it's a good challenge. And it was just nice to see all the strange decks. You know, Jeff Hoagland showed up with the Black-Green Frog deck. There was Todd Anderson's deck was really lovely. Somebody showed up with a Jund deck. JD and Clump-Heron showed up with Naya mid-range. I was just loving all of the decks. Like, there wasn't a single deck that I wasn't happy to see. Right,
and there was basically, first of all, if you didn't live through the Baneslayer Angel era of Magic, it was very much the same way. There was a 5-mana white creature that was literally better than everything else, and it just warped the format around its existence. Not everybody played it, but you always had to have a plan for it. And here we have a ridiculous white creature that's even better than that. There were like Angel Wars going on, Angel versus Angel. There was a flipped Angel, and then another player played an Archangel Avacyn, which doesn't get rid of Archangel or Avacyn the Purifier because they're different names. So then you could basically have 2 Avacyns in play at the same time, but your 6/5 is now indestructible. It was ridiculous. I believe it was round 12. I wrote it down. I was like, man, this is ridiculous. You should go check that out, because the weird back and forth. I play an Avacyn and you play an Avacyn, and then I flip mine and it kills most of your team, but then I play another one so I can make this one. It was ridiculous. This card is amazing whether or not you play it in multiples, and it's going to rule the format until something comes out in Eldritch Moon that takes care of it, basically.
Right.
That negates it in some way. I don't know what it's going to be, but you know, there's going to be something that makes her not as ridiculous as she is right now.
I also think that one of the cards that picked up the most in value between the pre-release and the open was Westvale Abbey. And a lot of people were trying to figure out, in their testing, they were like, yeah, this format's all about gaining 9 life and dealing 9 damage. We have to figure out what the best Westvale Abbey deck is. And I think that it probably was the green-white tokens deck that Team Lotus brought to the event. I was very impressed with Chris Anderson and company's list. Every time I walked past, they were just destroying people. It was also probably the best Gideon deck that was out there, and so I think that that's a deck to keep an eye on as well. Westvale Abbey is also just a ridiculous card. It slots in nicely into those red Eldrazi decks too, and it's going to be interesting to see how the format can evolve, because a lot of people were sideboarding Secure the Wastes in their white decks to be able to turn into a Westvale Abbey style deck after sideboard if the humans thing or the aggro thing wasn't working out. And so I'm excited to see what before Pro Tours, we don't have the full picture. Once the pros get their hands on things and they find things like the blue-red Thopters deck that just looks ridiculous, I'm sure something like that is going to come from this format because there's so many unique cards to be able to try to take advantage of.
Sure. There was...
It's funny that you mentioned... Oh, sorry.
Ahead.
I was just going to say, it's funny that you mentioned Gideon because there were several grinders who wrote posts prior to Baltimore, because they were playtesting and they were just sort of sharing their initial findings. Emma Handy was one of them. I think she wrote one of the better ones. Like, I was really impressed with hers. And they all seemed to think that Gideon was not going to be great this weekend. Like, they were just like, we're going into this, and I know that he was a beast before, but they were all telling people to sort of lower their expectations. And I think that was the one card that still, impressed people. And, I remember when I first saw it on camera, I remembered what all of their articles had said, and I was just like, oh, look at these people still using Gideon, and Gideon still is good. So so I would disregard what you read because he's still good.
It turns out the best card in Battle for Zendikar remains a very good card in Standard.
Yeah, pretty much.
One of the cool things I really liked seeing was Thing in the Ice work. We got to watch Thing in the Ice kick all the ass, man. When like that's also like one of the most Todd Andersonian decks I've ever seen. Like, he just loves that thing where he just got all this velocity and he's able to kind of interact with people, but he's able to really set up situations where, like, he's able to fire off 2 or 3 things. He's able to see interactions that the commentators weren't seeing, that when they got them, they were like, oh my God, he had a plan the whole time. Like, it was really terrific. And when Thing in the Ice just rocked it, man, it was bouncing stuff back and he was swinging, then he would, like, kill that. He would play 2 things in the ice and start get them both moving counters. And, oh my God, with the goggles, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. So
yeah, I couldn't help but wonder if Sphinx's Tutelage might be good again. Like, I love Todd's deck, and I would totally play this deck, even though I'm not usually a blue mage or a red mage, but I would 100% sleeve this deck up. But, my first reaction when I saw what he was trying to do, I played a Sphinx's Tutelage deck that also used Pyromancer's Goggles and also used things like Tormenting Voice and what have you. And so when I saw that was his plan, and I also saw where the meta was going, like, the second place competitor was mono white humans, and I was thinking, oh God, I would love to mill that deck out, because if you play Tutelage, you just basically win. And that was the first thing that came to my mind. And so I'm interested to see if maybe Todd comes to that conclusion, or maybe somebody else does. But the deck is awesome, and I would love if maybe there could be room for that.
I look forward to seeing Thing in the Ice at the Pro Tour. Hopefully more of it is going to be in the Invitational this weekend.
The price went down too. I think they're down to like $12 now. Like, they were $20, $21.
Right.
Now they're down to like $12. So I'd scoop those babies up because they're gonna be hot.
I think it may have a little bit further to fall. I mean, we're having big set opened a lot. Let's just remember, now it was in a set with fetch lands, but regardless, Siege Rhino was winning Pro Tours, huge in Modern, huge in Standard, $5. So just saying, it's just rare. Like, it's not Mythic. If it were Mythic, I think absolutely.
Well, Declaration's up to 12. Declaration's 12, 13.
Right, but Declaration sees play in more decks, basically. But regardless, now there was also our first new format with a modern unbanning of Ancestral Vision and Sword of the Meek. Oh my God! Did something break, Aaron? What happened? Oh my God! Oh my God!
Well, it didn't have a huge impression. There were some notable finishes. I believe Jerry Thompson finished in the top 32. I want to say, with his version. I want to say 30-ish. Trying to find the list. Jerry, where are you? He finished 26th.
He was playing like a Jeskai control deck that had access. It was blue-white, and he had access to a gifts package in addition to the Thopter Sword package.
Yeah, sure. There were several players. So Jerry Thompson came in 26th with his blue-white Thopter list. Young man above him, Brian Mark's Thopter Gifts, came in 25. So they didn't really, bust through the gates, but there's definitely a lot of interest there. I think people are just trying to feel it out and see where exactly the right home for these cards are. I've actually seen a lot of talk of, so people were talking about Green-Red Tron specifically and how Tron is going to move on from the Eye of Ugin ban. And I've seen a lot of talk about blue-white Tron being the new Tron. And specifically, not only because of the Eye of Ugin ban, but also because it can use things like Dr. Foundry and Sword of the Meek. And so there were quite a few Gifts Tron lists in this top 32, which I was really excited about. And I'm just excited to see. I mean, this is really our first taste of the post-bannings, post-Splinter Twin, post-Amulet Blue Modern. We really haven't been able to see what the format is like because the Eldrazi happened, you know, and so it was really nice to see Scapeshift win an event. And even Scapeshift had some spicy tech. And, you know, we saw Jund and Infect and old friends like Merfolk and you know, Faux Pod, as I like to call it. And this whole top 32 was just a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. I'm excited. Aaron, you'll be excited about this. I'm excited to see where Dredge in Modern goes from here, because Prized Amalgam and Insolent Neonate are insane tools that Dredge had not had access to, particularly Prized Amalgam. I think sends the Dredge deck in a direction that is more board control-y, a lot more similar to Legacy Dredge, where it sort of plays out like a control deck. And, you know, you're just trying to keep advantage of the board, and if you get a little tiny advantage on the board, then there's just no stopping the avalanche of card advantage that you get out of your graveyard.
Well, I still believe that Zombie Loam is a good deck. You know, that was the one that Jason Chung top-aided Melbourne with and Raph Levy piloted for a really long time. And it was definitely a metagame call. Like, it was fantastic against the Eldrazi. It destroys Affinity. You know, but if we're going to be expecting this influx of blue decks, I want to be playing Ravens, Crime, and Light from the Loam. Like, I will rip your hand apart. I think Call the Bloodline is really good as being Zombie Infestation 5 and 6. Prized Amalgam, obviously. If you're going to be playing with Thopters, Dark Blast. I mean, there's just a lot of cards that Dredge has access to that, you know, I'm seeing these decks kind of crop up that, you know, are a piece of cake for Dredge. And so I would still advocate Zombie Loam as a fine deck. And, you know, just seeing what people are playing, I think it's still a really good choice.
All right, so there was a rare printed about 10 years ago. It's a black and a generic mana for a rare instant. It changes the target spell with a single target. You lose life equal to that spell's converted mana cost. Ruben,
yes, that card.
What is that card?
That card is a rare from Planar Chaos, and it is called Imp's Mischief.
Imp's Mischief went up about 500% this week.
Yeah, because the converted mana cost of Ancestral Vision is zero, and you just redirect it and draw yourself 3 cards. Instead of your opponent taking them. So, yeah, I've seen some talk about that. The problem with Imp's Mischief is, where do you put it, right?
The problem is the same problem it had back in the day. This card was made right after Ancestral Vision was made. This was an answer to the problem of, well, Ancestral Vision was a problem, but this certainly wasn't the answer to it, because it was never good. It never works. Whoever did this is doing the good old-fashioned, like, internet buyout, get every copy on the internet, bump the price 5 times. Why not? Because, you know, it looks like an answer. It's not an answer. In fact, it's horrible. Do not play this card as a result of Ancestral Vision. Even if Ancestral was being good and, like, was half of the top 8, card's still not worth it. It's just not good. I mean,
there's one more card from the new set, Aaron, that I wanted to put on your radar. One of the guys at the shop here at Tales of Adventure is testing Stitchwing Scob, which is a 3/1 flyer for 4 from the new set that has the ability colorless and a blue and discard 2 cards. Return it from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. And so he's doing that in order to get back Prized Amalgams and also discard Dredgers. And
oh my god.
So there you go. There's another one for
Have him call me.
So the format is nowhere near solved. Neither format is anywhere near solved. You know, there was a, you know, I think that Mine Excavation, which is a card from Shadowmoor, that colorless and a white, return target artifact or enchantment from your graveyard to your hand, conspire. I think that's the kind of card that I would like to see in a blue-white Gifts style, maybe even blue-white Tron style deck, to be able to rebuy pieces of the Sword Thopter combo. And so I think that there's a lot more, you know, exploration that we can be doing, a lot more investigation to be done in both of these formats.
Right. So
can I talk about one more innovative deck before we go?
No, I just wanted to explain what Conspire was, because it's a really old mechanic, and Aaron kind of brought it up. Mine Excavation is a white and generic mana. It's a common sorcery. Return target artifact or enchantment in the graveyard to its owner's hand. Conspire, as you play this spell, you may tap 2 untapped creatures you control that share a color with it. If you do, you copy it and may choose a new target for the copy.
Right. Hello. And so you can rebuy copies of Thopters that die. Now, unfortunately, the Thopters from Thopter Foundry are blue, so you don't get to Conspire with your Thopters. womp womp. But even still, usually you don't have to rebuy 2 artifacts. Usually you're just rebuying the 1.
Right.
You know, if you make a gifts pile that's, you know, Thopter, Sword, Excavation, Academy Ruins, or something like that, then your opponent's in like a no-win scenario. The last thing I wanted to say about this weekend was brand new format, and Star City Games putting on their great show, and Cedric Phillips tweeted out the numbers, which I was having trouble finding because apparently I must have happened today. I got blocked by Cedric for some reason, but I can't see his tweets. Anyway, the max viewership was over 24,000 people, and 383,000 total hours were watched of the Open this week. And so people are really excited for the new format. People were really excited to watch it on SCG Live, which is, you know, the gold standard over top of even official WotC coverage. But yeah, this new standard had a lot of people excited, not just to play. You know, I think that there were about 630 folks for this first Open, which is a very high number for a first Open. Usually card availability is a big issue. And so the first Opens usually aren't as big as this. And so I was pretty impressed that, you know, people were so excited to play these new cards, to watch these new cards in action. So I thought that was pretty cool. So, and we're not even close to done yet. There's a lot more innovation to be made.
There you go.
So I want to bring it back to standard for a little bit because there was one deck in particular that personally spoke to me. And Ruben, you had the pleasure of facing it this past weekend. There was a young man.
Pleasure's a word for it.
There was a young man who finished in 33rd place playing an Esper Starfield deck. And this was a deck that when I first saw the list, I was just like, what in slow moving hell is going on here? But then he wrote a post for MTG Card Market and he explained a lot of his decisions. And once he was able to connect the dots, it made a lot of sense. So the deck revolves around Starfield and Nyx. It runs 3 Wasteland Strangler. Where's Ruben going?
Ruben, come back! Ruben,
was he so traumatized by the deck?
I'm sorry.
You ran
First
him
of
off.
all, I didn't want to hear about the deck anymore, and second of all, I had to let the cat out of the room.
The cat had to leave.
Before I could let the cat out of the bag. Okay, but anyways, so the deck revolves around Starfield and Nyx, and
I also had to
of
live through this deck once already. I don't need to relive my nightmares.
Oh, come on, it'll be fun.
Anyway,
so the deck revolves around Starfield and Nyx, and specifically Demonic Pact. And so there's a lot of really neat interactions between Demonic Pact and the Starfield. So one of the interactions is that when Starfield turns all of your enchantments into creatures, the Demonic Pact can kill itself. Like it can do 4 damage to itself, gain you 4 life. The Demonic Pact goes in the graveyard, and then you can bring it back with Starfield and sort of repeat ad nauseum. You can also use Angelic Purge. He had 3 copies of Angelic Purge, and you can use that. You can sacrifice that to your Angelic Purge and kill something. And there was just a lot of really neat interaction there. He had Silumgar's command, which we really haven't seen a lot of. It was Oath of Jace. Like he was able to use Oath of Jace to fuel the purge. He was able to attack with an Oath of Jace because the oaths can be kind of useless after a while. And it was just an amazing deck, and I would totally play this. And I felt a little bad because I remembered your interaction, but it's a sweet deck. And so if you are looking for something spicy, you should play it.
And if you want to beat the humans deck, boy, let me tell you, I stood no chance. Like, well, it was a slaughtering. Like, you know, just dead weights, rebuying, and Languish Main, and
wraps, Stasis Snares.
It was insane. There was nothing. Even if I had the Goddess of God draws, I don't think I could have won. It was unreal. Wow. So yeah, if that's something you're interested in, you know, it's got the graveyard interactions. It's got the cool mythic from Origins that nobody else plays, so that was pretty cool. I gotta say,
the deck is actually amazing. Honestly, I think it's absolutely terrific. So, yeah, so that's great. Starfield and Nyx, you kept talking about it, and I was like, are we talking about modern? Like, because you know, Starfield and Nyx, talking about Theros. I'm like, that card's not in standard. Right. Yeah, it was in Origins, and it's ridiculous.
It's insane.
It certainly seems that way. All right, so we're going to keep moving on here. We've spoken about our formats, our new formats. Enter the Battlefield is next for Desperate Ravings, which if I had graphics, I would show you them. But regardless, our next topic here, Enter the Battlefield premieres April 25th on Twitch, on Netflix, which I think is amazing. These are, you know, the Walk the Plains guys. This is Nate Holt. This is Sean Kornhauser. They have made a Enter the Battlefield Life on the Magic the Gathering Pro Tour feature-length documentary, and it looks absolutely fantastic. They've got a trailer up there, which looks really sweet. And for me, and I know it's like a sort of a weird thing, but I'm kind of a movie geek, so I see the quality of the film that they're using, the quality of the cameras they're using is way higher, even higher than Walk the Plains, which is, by the way, already using a very high quality camera. You never saw anything close on the Magic Show for what they're doing with Walk the Plains in terms of hardware. But they've got they must have gotten like a Red or like a real deal movie camera, because it looks amazing. And this is the first full-length documentary film about Magic. Wizards is obviously trying to make it a big deal. Wizards obviously funded its creation. They've been working on this thing for 2 years now.
Yeah.
Documentaries.
Over 2 years.
Documentaries are incredibly difficult to make. Even short ones, even those 10-minute ones or whatever. I make a history show, right? Sort of like a documentary. Those things are unbelievably, ridiculously difficult. And so to put together a 2-hour one or even a 90-minute one is a colossal feat. So they should be very proud of themselves. I'm really excited about it. I know Wizards is, and so I can imagine it's going to be an excellent piece of entertainment that you can see on the 25th. What do you guys think about it?
Yeah, I am, as someone who's a film nerd and a Magic nerd, this is it's all coming together for me. Nate and Sean are two of the most talented and dedicated people I've ever met, let alone in Magic. And I'm just super excited that we have something that we can call our own and we can point to and we can say, hey, folks that don't know what Magic is, well, go to your Netflix account, go to YouTube. Right. Starting on April 26th. Oh, by the way, it's also streaming on Twitch on April 25th all day and being live tweeted and all that kind of good stuff. And we can point to it and say, this is why this matters to us, is these folks are at the top of the mountain. And it's just super awesome that not only is it being done, but it's being fully supported by Wizards, so that we can get the biggest and, the most exciting names attached to the product. We've got World Champion Shahar Shenhar and all the big names that we know about, like Reed Duke, of course, and the rest of the Peach Garden Oath. But we also have a narrator named Wil Wheaton, who's a big celebrity, right. Multiple million of Twitter followers and a big actor, who's attached his name to the product. It's on Netflix, which is a big deal if you're a documentary and you get your name on Netflix. I'm excited to see more from this, because right now all we have is a trailer and a homepage and a hashtag ETB movie. I think is the hashtag. Right. And so, I'm very, I just can't wait to see this.
Absolutely. So I think they did a great job. I think the announcement went over incredibly well, and everyone loves it, and they deserve all the kudos.
Yeah, I'm excited for the cast. I think they picked a really diverse group. You have Shahar, who's sort of like certainly the youngest cast member, who's had a lot of success very quickly. And, you have Melissa, who was the first woman to top 8 a Pro Tour. You have Huey, who's in the Hall of Fame. You have somebody like Chris Picula, who everybody is rooting for to get in the Hall of Fame, and sort of him talking about how he juggles real life with his Magic ambitions. You have people like Owen and Reed, who are on top of the world. You also have private personalities. We don't know a lot about these people. Like Reed in particular is very private, we don't know much about him. Same with Melissa, she's mostly kind of kept mum about a lot of things. And so I think it's an opportunity to really get to see more of these people than just Magic players. And that's something I really push for. I feel like I root for people more when I care about them, when, I get that they're great players. I get that they have skills and knowledge, but I want to know who you are. Like, I want to know what you do for a living. I want to know what your favorite color is. I want to know what your pet peeve is. And when I can build that attachment, I care what happens to you. And I really, some of these people I already care about, but others I don't quite yet. And it's not that I don't care about them, like that sounded wrong, but, I want to know more about them. I would love to know what other people know. And so I'm fascinated just to get to know these people a little better.
I was watching some League of Legends coverage and over the weekend as well, because I haven't seen it in a while. And I was kind of complaining about it earlier this week, that I think it's kind of hard to follow and it's really difficult to kind of see what's going on. And I still think that's kind of the way of it, in terms of they use a lot of slang. They kind of expect everybody to know all the characters' names. The camera keeps jumping around all over the place and they don't always explain why. But what they do got and what they do have is, they build characters. They make you love these players. They take amazing photos of these players. You know how good these players look? They
Yeah.
look amazing. These guys look great. They do a feature on the team. They do a feature on every player. They do a feature on the coaches. They do a feature about the event. They do a feature about where you're at in the series. Like, they have these really nice desks. They have these incredible, I mean, just all this great stuff. And you just see it. Like, League of Legends is a backdrop. It is the people that people are coming out to see, that are buying tickets, and they're talking about their favorite players. They make these players look amazing. Yeah, maybe they photoshopped out some zits or something on the guy. Who cares? But he looks great. You look like you're watching an NFL broadcast. It's absolutely ridiculous. So, you know, if Wizards is leaning in that direction, and we'll get to it later in terms of what they want to do for Premier Sports, for esports, if they want to make Magic more exciting, one of the things they got to figure out is that the Pro Tour is not about your friggin' set. The Pro Tour is about these people. The Pro Tour is about these amazing personalities that everybody loves, that people connect to. Yeah, the cards are cool, but no one's really feeling Arlen Cord because she can't talk, walk, or play Magic in front of you. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, it's absolutely ridiculous to see it done so well. And it's just right there, Wizards. If you wanted these specials, these little bits, you know, when a game goes, you know, when it's time to go to sideboarding, stop that live looking garbage. Let's learn about the players that we're watching. When you start building up these archives, yeah, it's going to take some work to keep them up, but it's totally worth it. And I think you see that in spades with League of Legends. Yes, there's there's different challenges, and games last different lengths, and there's not, not everybody's on a team that are all nicely branded. But those are things that you can get over, because who wouldn't want to watch little vignettes about Reed, about LSV, about Chapin, about Raphael Levy? Like, the dude is a monster, like karate, karate teacher. Like, I want to see him break some boards and stuff, man. I think that's awesome. Let's make Raph out to be the coolest dude, because he is the coolest dude. Right. And they just don't spend enough time on it.
Well, I think it also forces the people to, one of the complaints that I've had in the past is that the players don't necessarily brand themselves either, or that the players don't often have a lot to say. And I don't want it to seem like I'm entirely blaming them. I think part of the problem is that they've never really had to. It's like, they've never been, if they know that there's going to be like an interview segment, or if they know that they're going to have to be on, they might take steps to prepare themselves, or they might, take steps to put on that game face. But, now that I think about it, it's like I can understand why they may not be as savvy in that department, because they've never had to be. Whereas these League of Legends guys know, if I walk out on that platform or that dais or whatever, there's a whole bunch of lights, there's a whole bunch of cameras, I gotta be photogenic.
It's not even only that. It's that if you go to a team if you go to a League of Legends team, if you go to a Hearthstone team, if you go to an esports team, any esports team, they have a guy, they have a media person that teaches you how to do interviews. If you go to the NFL, if you go to Major League Baseball, one of the first things you do is you go to handle the media class. When you're a Magic pro, you don't get that class. Right. Unfortunately, I mean, I wish we could, but you know what? It's not in the budget, and it's not in the budget for a lot of things. It's there are lots of sports that don't have it. But this has always been a huge problem with poker, because poker doesn't have a union, right? There's no central body for poker, and so poker players are notoriously bad with the press. And so are Magic players. And it's unfortunate that there's no backbone, there's no structure for Magic players to market themselves beyond, do you write, or are you naturally charismatic, or there are some people who just they don't want to write, and they are charismatic and they do interesting things, but perhaps don't have the platform. And definitely videos like this going forward are definitely ways to build characters. Especially for people who aren't great at self-promotion.
Right. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, first of all, we can always circle back to there needs to be a dress code for the Pro Tour. I'm serious. Showing up in your sweatpants and your dirty T-shirt that's all pulled, loose because you've been in it all night.
Don't even get me started.
Cut that crap out. But think about it this way. First of all, the chat mentioned, last night I was, WotC needs to promote the teams, and then last week, teams are meaningless. Well, they kind of are meaningless, but that's not the point. And it's not even about promoting the teams. I'm actually talking about promoting the individual players. Imagine this scenario, okay? I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to imagine a Pro Tour, and they have announced round 11. And round 11 shows up with, sweet graphics, and there's fire and whatever. And round 1, and, on the left, and a big flame comes up Patrick Chapin. On the right, comes up Yuya Watanabe. And, and you see them, and then all of a sudden, there's, a really short clip of, Chapin Chapin talking about why he wants to be like the best and he wants to win the Pro Tour. And there's another clip and it's like Yuya and he's at home and he's like playtesting with like his niece and nephew or something and having like a family moment around Magic. And then all of a sudden it kind of cuts to the floor and like the guys look good and they look, like they're either in suits or they're in really nice like collared shirts. And there's like lights that are going around and there's nobody else on stage. Just those two guys. It's all about that match. They start talking about the decks they're playing. They're shuffling up. They're looking good. They're starting to play. And then comes the commentary and comes whatever. So game one's over. We cut to another vignette talking about Chapin and his philosophy on sideboarding. And we cut to another vignette where Yuya is like crushing somebody in a playback and they're talking about how amazing he was in that one. Then they go to the sideboard tech where they have somebody that has their sideboards up on a wall with another pro commentator who's able to explain the sideboards and what's in them and why they're in them. Yeah, whatever, information gets leaked. Who cares? This is about a broadcast. We go back to the realm, you know what I mean? And that's it. That's the setup. And you kind of just repeat that with little vignettes, with little spices of video and inputs about these amazing people and characters, and you stop worrying about jumping all over the stage. You take these two characters, you put them like mano a mano, and you make them important, and you make the match the star. And that's what I saw at League of Legends that I've just never, ever seen in a Magic tournament, not even close.
I just want to add that I would like to, when Enter the Battlefield, if it does come out on like DVD or Blu-ray, I'd like to order the special All Reduke edition with 3D glasses. Just, I'm hoping that there's like one Charlie's Angels slow motion hair flip, like the.
One
I
day,
got them film like
they filmed it with the nice cameras, so you know what? Fingers crossed, we'll get there.
Well, I mean,
come on, hold! Don't let me down.
Well, with VR technology, surely there's going to be a Magic thing where you can like walk around and like play Reduke in 3D and like play all of your favorite personalities, at the table or whatever. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, so let's keep moving here. We have the Judge Program Overhaul. The judges have changed the way that the Judge Program is structured for the first time since 2004. So 12 years of Magic change has gone by. Bringing up the website now, the new World Order, where they used to have 5 levels, now they only have 3, and they have like 3+ and 3++ or whatever that they want to call, which they have like different names or rankings for, which is kind of like weirdly the same thing they were already doing, but it's okay. Because what did level 4 mean and what did level 5 mean and where was anything split up, and now you have different types of judges, and level 1s just play REL and level 2s are able to play the competitive REL or able to judge the competitive REL ones, and then the level 3 are like I think it's the Grand Prix judges, and there's Grand Prix head judges that are their own kind of thing that they can work those type of events, and it's interesting that they've first of all, it's great to hear about the Judge Program that isn't like something went horribly wrong and broke and everything sucks. Instead, they're trying to restructure things to realize that we live in a world where the Judge Program has changed because Magic has changed. Magic needs to grow. The Judge Program needs to grow. So these are some real structural changes that, Ruben, can you give me any sort of analysis here, because I feel like I'm missing some of it.
So the way that I sort of, now I was an L1 judge until about a month ago. I lapsed. Mm-hmm. And I've been an L1 judge previous to that, and I've never really gone past that, but I've been a part of the judge program, and at least on a partial level, and I've worked with a lot of judges in the past, and so I've had a lot of conversations about what the judge program levels mean. And as far as I can tell, the difference between an L4 and an L5 in what is now the old system was not much. There really wasn't a differentiation there other than a number. But L4s and L5s were pretty much on an equivalent level. And so that made the levels somewhat meaningless in terms of designation. And now with these new levels, they're more able to correctly identify which judges are at not only which level, but which responsibilities they hold. So having all of the level 3s, which are premier judges, have different titles, such as regional coordinator, Grand Prix head judge, Pro Tour head judge, program coordinator. These are really specific designations that will help the judge program much more easily and quickly set up events, get things organized, and basically keep their whole house in order, which I think is a big boon to the Magic Judge program. And I think will lead to less judge drama, which is something that, we as the generic Magic community don't hear a ton about, but it does exist. Just like within any community, there is some amount of drama, and the judges aren't immune to that. And I think that this new simplified and yet specified new order is actually going to help a lot with that. And so I'm very excited for this change. I'm not huge. I'm not an insider in the judge program, but as someone who was an L1 judge and so sort of has a little bit of knowledge on the program, I think that this is nothing but positivity in terms of what this change means.
Sure. All right. So any thoughts on that, Aaron?
Well, the only thing I know for sure about the judge program is I'm pretty sure that there's like a file cabinet somewhere with a big file an inch thick on me, and I don't want to know what's in that file. So they probably know all about me. But the only thing I was going to say, I'm sorry.
Nope, you go.
I was just going to say, you were talking about positivity, Ruben. It seems like the response to this has been overwhelmingly positive. This was something that I was expecting to see a lot of pushback on, and maybe it's happening privately. I don't know that, but everybody I know of, at least in the judge program, is very excited about that. I also noticed in the announcement that another reason this was done was to create more realistic expectations in terms of promotion. From what I understand, getting to 1 to 3 is definitely a progression, but there were a lot of people who were 3s working very hard at level 3 and then getting very discouraged that they weren't getting to level 4 and assuming that was just what naturally happened. Well, I breezed through 1 and I killed it at 2 and I'm kicking ass at 3 and I'm stalling. And, another reason this was done was to sort of get rid of that expectation where, yes, you are kicking ass, and then not to say that doesn't mean anything, or not to say that that's not doing anything, but that's, they kind of wanted to keep people motivated in that regard, because there were people who felt like, well, I should be trying for 4, but there aren't any openings, and that's very discouraging. And you mentioned burnout as well. I know several judges who stepped down in the past couple of years, and mostly because they were being overworked. When there's only so many level 4s and they're doing all of the things that only level 4s or level 5s can do, it does create burnout. And so you're delegating more responsibilities, you're trying to keep people in the game, you're trying to keep them motivated, you're trying to keep them happy. I also appreciated the transparency, especially coming off of the issues with Oath of the Gatewatch and how cryptic that whole thing was, and how everybody was like, we just want to know what's going on. I thought that they released this in a very honest fashion, and I really appreciated that as well.
Yeah. I just wanted to mention a couple other things that's good about this. This is the first major overhaul to the judge program in Magic since 2004. And back in 2004, the biggest events that existed were less than 800 people. Now we have 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 person GPs, not to mention 600, 700, 800 person opens and other third-party tournament series that are becoming enormous. Oh, by the way, there's a different number of Pro Tours. There's a World Championship. There's 3 different types of states tournaments. There's all types of events that are happening. Right. Since the first type of judge program, or the most recent change to the judge program, came into effect. And so change is going to have to be inevitable. You can't just run on something that's, over half the distance back to before. The current set of rules, 12 years, is a longer set of time than from when that came into effect to the beginning of Magic. Right. So this change was inevitable. Sure. The other thing I wanted to note was that this is a purely judge decision. As far as I can tell, there was no WotC interference. Hasbro didn't come to them. Wizard or Magic did not come to them. This was purely done out of the folks who are in charge of the MTG judge community, which is awesome that they take such initiative without having to be to be told what to do, and I think speaks a lot of how self-sufficient the MTG judge community is and how important it is to Magic.
Sure. So we're going to keep moving here with splash damage because we're running out of time. There has been a new president for Wizards of the Coast. Greg Leeds, who has been the president of Wizards for a very long time. I want to say, was it 10 years? I want to say
at least. Years. I think it was longer. I think he came in 2003.
Sure. So we're talking 12, 13 years. He's been there for a long time, basically for most of what people would imagine as who led Wizards of the Coast. Greg Leeds led Wizards of the Coast. I've only been sort of kind of close in his vicinity that one time at Worlds. Never actually gotten to say any words to the man. But regardless, he did resign, and he has been replaced by a Microsoft executive, Chris Cox, who has gaming experience. He was running the Leapfrog educational arm of their software business. He comes from Microsoft as a VP of part of their tech divisions. So over here, I'm reading from Seeking Alpha, who did like a nice little bullet point list here. Chris Cox will take over the gaming publisher subsidiary purchased by Hasbro for $325 million in 1999. Obviously, Magic, Dungeons and Dragons, and Duel Masters. Job postings on the Wizards of the Coast website seem to tip off that the company is interested in building out its Premier Play and esports business. So let's figure out what that means. What that means is they now have 2 job ads for developers with Unity experience to work in Magic Digital. Unity is the framework that allows games to work in basically any platform. It's why you can play Hearthstone on your phone. It's why you can play it on OS X. You can play it in Windows. You can play it on your iPad. It doesn't matter. That framework allows you to play the game in those different types of spots. And so obviously, I'm not saying there's any drama that around what happened and this person leaving, this person being hired. Maybe Greg Leeds was like, I'm out, and let's figure out who else should be running it. Well, there's this tech guy. And again, I'm just going to pontificate as a dude here, just going to postulate, if you will. This looks like, from an outsider's perspective, maybe this is the guy who came in and they were like, here's Magic Online. Look at this big pile of money. And Chris goes, do you realize the dump truck that is waiting on the other side of that wall? And the other side of that wall is Unity, where you can play Magic Online friggin' anywhere. Instead, I have to have it run on Windows. It looks like it's from 95. It's ridiculous. This is an embarrassment. Somebody, I think, finally just gave him the business. I want to say that happened because I feel like it's what Magic players have been saying for so long, and finally there was a guy who was able to put, maybe able to get those wheels turning and saying, this is a priority. Like, it's not enough to just have Magic Online kind of, keep up with the treadmill of releases, and let's have the same client that people still think is ugly and hard to use because it's ugly and hard to use.
Sure.
Instead, let's make something that's brilliant. And they talk about it in their in their recent news report. Let's see here. What was it here? The Hasbro's annual report notes a new digital platform for Magic the Gathering on page 40. All these links will be in the show notes, and or Ruben will share them with the chat as appropriate. But regardless, this is all very cryptic. This is very vague. This is what happens because we get to take little things, we get to run with them because they're really fun that way. Maybe this is just like an overhaul of Duels or something. But what I want to believe is that this is Duels goes away, Magic Online doesn't go away, but rather we get transported. We get, we move all of our cards from the zeros and ones go from over here to the zeros and ones over there, and we're able to play on a platform that isn't embarrassing, that is exciting, that has, like animations and effects that aren't cringeworthy. And when you have that, you have that type of esports feel where things are happening on screen that are cool to watch. Because Magic is not cool to watch. But if you make a digital Magic cool to watch, you're going to see a real turnaround in the acceptance of those who are watching Magic online. Like, actually watching Magic online.
Yeah.
But
I think that, there's a couple things here. First of all, let's not jump to the conclusion that Greg Leeds was pushed out or anything like that. I mean, he led the company, and every year for the last, at least 3 years, it has been the biggest moneymaker for Hasbro. Like, Magic the Gathering made more money for Hasbro than Transformers did during the Transformers years, which is absurd. So it's not like Greg Leeds did a poor job. I think that he was spectacular. It might have even been his decision. I actually think it probably was his decision to move on. If you're in a job for 15 years, you want to look for, perhaps he wanted to look for greener pastures, and Chris Cox wanted to have a challenge. And you know what? Wizards of the Coast online development is a challenge. And so, I tend to think that might have been more amicable than perhaps the conspiracy theorists might have led us to believe on Reddit and Twitter. But in any case, getting someone who was in charge of Leapfrog, which is an educational games company, someone who's a VP for Fly.com, which was an airline search engine, which is also has a lot of back-end software stuff that needs to be done. Somebody that's got a lot of experience with things like Xbox and brand management and stuff like that. I'm very excited and optimistic that this is the guy that makes Magic Online, let's say, better than it currently is. So it's going to take a while to see if that's what's going to happen. I think that if it's going to happen, it's going to be with this guy.
I mean, the ships move slowly and they turn slowly, what have you. But Aaron, how do you feel about sort of these kind of rumblings of? Now, obviously, there's a leadership change, but there's also like Magic Digital is getting a lot more like little feelers here and job postings there and notes in the annual report.
Mm-hmm. And clues in the clue tokens.
All I can say is I hope they don't cock it up.
Yeah. Boy,
wow, man, she was waiting so long. You held on to that one.
She was waiting for an hour and a half.
Dude. She got it right in the pre-show, and she was like, all right, we're going to put it deep. We're going to do a long con. Let them talk. Drop it.
No, I'm excited. I do think fresh blood is good. I think that anytime, Magic Online is a very polarizing topic, and for a long time, it's like, I do think that they've done a lot of good work recently. They've introduced the leagues. We see the way that things are being handled, and there's been a lot of really good decisions. But I think this is really what it needs. And if he's the person to do it, I'm happy to see what comes of it. I don't know much about the guy. I don't know much about his replacement. I'm not really politics girl, so I don't really know what led to all of that. But if a good Magic Online can come from this, I'm completely behind it, because it's fine for my needs personally, but I want to, I think like we all do, we want to be able to introduce our friends and our loved ones and people new to Magic Online. And right now it's really difficult to do that. And, it's just, and also too, you don't want to see people hating something that you love, and so when I'm having a really good time on Magic Online, it's difficult to go on Twitter and see Paul Reitzel and what happened with the mocks and that whole fiasco this past weekend and see other people having a terrible time. You want to be able to log on and see people loving what you love. Like when we were watching the Open this past weekend, people were loving the Open, and people were, that hashtag was lighting up as so many positive things, and that's what you want to log online and see. You don't want to see endless Reddit threads of this is terrible, this is why I don't play Magic Online, this is why I'm not giving you my money. It's a really crummy feeling, and so I want to be,
people play Magic Online not because they love Magic Online. It's because they love Magic and can play it online. Yeah. And so if we can change that to being we love Magic and we love Magic Online and actually love the client, boy, let me tell you, Magic will not be stuck in the past. Will not become vinyl. If they can update themselves, then they can be the best ever. There was a popular Reddit thread this week that was asking, Hearthstone folks that came to Magic later, which do you prefer? And almost to a person, the people that responded were Magic is the more complex, more rewarding game. Hearthstone is easier, more accessible, and more fun to watch and play, but Magic is the better game. And I think that you're not going to get a lot of disagreement, even from Hearthstone players, or other TCG players, or even other game players. Magic is the best game, and so if we can translate that in some reasonable way to the online platform, there's no ceiling.
Oh, the other thing that I want to note with this is, please let this be the part where NVIDIA sponsors the Pro Tour, where Coca-Cola, where Pepsi, where Sony, we run a Civil War trailer between rounds at the Pro Tour.
Right.
That's totally okay. Take Marvel's money and make the Pro Tour $2 or $3 million worth. Who cares, man?
This guy Cox has connections to Microsoft. He has connections to Leapfrog. He has connections to, other big businesses out there. So there's no reason why, as the president of the company, he can't be like, hey, Steve, that I used to work with, you own or are VP of marketing at X company. Perhaps you'd be interested in advertising in this ridiculous IP where there's a lot of, affluent people who participate in this hobby.
Right.
I think that's, obviously we're preaching to the choir when we're bouncing off each other here.
Of course, but I just wanted to note that to me is, I hope that's part of it, that they have somebody at the presidential role in the company who says it's okay to let Reebok and Nike and Marvel and whoever, put ads, put things, put branding alongside our other branding, and it won't make Magic suck. In fact, it will make Magic more successful because it legitimizes it in a way that it's not. We've already been over this obviously a million times. Whatever. So we got to move past into going infinite really quickly here. There was a Reddit thread that was really interesting that said, what bad Magic or related decision did you make long ago that you regret? And obviously the answers for this one go, that you make long ago that still makes you cringe. That's the key phrase there. What Magic related decision did I make long ago that still makes me cringe? There was a Grand Prix in about, 2011, 2012. It was the Grand Prix in DC. It was when Mythic was the deck. Mythic with 4 Baneslayer Angels and 4 Lotus Cobras and Eldrazi Conscription and all that. That was the deck, and I got to play that deck, and it was great. I made day 2. I was like X3 for a while, and I was X4 for a while. I lost my 5th one, and there was 1 round to go, and I was like, well, I'm X5 and whatever, and I'd rather go hang out with my friends, or I'd rather go do something else. So I dropped, and I ran into Chapin, and he was like, hey man, how you doing? What's your record, whatever. And I was like, well, I was like, I'm X5, but I dropped, and he just looked at me. He gave me that what? He said, you dropped? And I was like, yeah. It's not a big deal. It's whatever. He was like, dude, you were X5? You were still alive for prizes. You were still alive for points, all this stuff. And I'm just like, and I tried to kind of just sort of play it off and say, you know what I mean? It's okay, it's whatever. But, I do regret not just at least finishing out that run. What had happened was I got crushed by mono red 2 rounds in a row. And I was just in that, I'm just tired of getting smashed. And it just feels like every matchup is the worst. And I'm not playing well because I'm frustrated. But it was just that kind of moment where, Chapin was like, dude, why did you drop? Why are you not playing the next coming round? And I was just, it's just one of those things that I still look back and I still wish that I had just kept on, and I still cringe and go, you didn't have to drop from that event. Even if I lost again, at least I could say I played the whole Grand Prix instead of dropping a round out.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Oh God, here we go.
There's so many bad decisions. I don't know which one to pick. I told the judge he wasn't the boss of me once. It's a good time. I think the most we'll get to that one later. I think the moment that I keep coming back to is when I first came back to the game. The first GP I ever went to was GP Chicago, and it was being held at Navy Pier. And for those who don't know, Navy Pier is very cramped. The ceilings are very, very low. There's not a lot of room to walk, and as luck would have it, there were a lot of people. And I had started reading articles again, but I'd never really met anybody famous or anybody visible, and I'm a fast walker. And so we were all walking as if we were in a funeral procession, and I was just sort of kind of complaining about that. And I was like, God, these slow walkers are the worst. And I end up stepping on the guy in front of me's heel. And he kind of stumbles a little bit, and he turns around oh God, I'm so sorry. I'm not really sorry, but I'm feigning sorry. And so he turns back around. I'm like, oh, this guy, I wish he'd just hurry up. And he has a shirt, a polo shirt thrown over his shoulder, and his name is stitched on the shirt. And the name on the shirt is Luis Scott Vargas.
And now you know the rest of the story.
Right. Then I look at the name and I'm like, oh my God. Yeah. And I start queening out. And I'm like, and I'm not quiet about this kind of thing. And I'm like, oh my God, you're Leslie. I'm so sorry. And then he turns around and he's like, do I know you? And I'm like, I'm a big fan of your work, and I can't believe I started stuck in your shoe. I'm so sorry. And I'm freaking out. He's like, it's okay. He's like, it's Navy Pier. I get it. What's your name? And I'm like, I'm Aaron. And he was really, really lovely. But just, when I had him on my show, he was my guest on the deck tease. And the first thing I had him on the show, I was like, I can't believe I stepped on your heel. And so that is the moment that will just live for me in infamy, is when I stepped on LSV's heel.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have some cringeworthy moments. I've been on camera quite a bit during my Magic career, and sometimes the mic is hot, for example. I've had some hot mic issues in the past, but in my head, when I think of what makes me cringe the most of my Magic past, when I was maybe 13, right when I first started playing competitively, I had a binder, and it was the It was the prize of my possession. It was a 4X set of Urza's Legacy. And one of the first foil rares I ever opened was a foil Grim Monolith, and that was in there also. And I had like, maybe 30 total foils from Urza's Legacy and 4 of everything. And I left it on a table, and I took my eyes away from it for maybe 30 seconds, and it was gone. And it disappeared, and I never saw it again. No one at the shop saw who took it. That we tried to put it together and was like, well, there were these 2 guys that no one had seen before. We think it was them, but there was no way to track it. And I think back on that, and that's when I really got serious about, a lot of people get their bike stolen or they get something stolen when they're a kid. And it makes them, it changes them, right? It makes them more jaded for humanity. And I think that was the moment where I was like, I don't want to carry around Magic cards. Like, that's not a thing I want to do anymore. And that, I think, is the most, whenever I think about that, I'm just like, Ruben, you're the stupidest person. How could you do that? And so I think that's the most cringeworthy moment that I've ever had in Magic.
So before we round out to the finisher, I'm going to give you a bonus one. Many years ago, Olivier Ruel was inducted into the Hall of Fame. And I was making the Magic Show, like I was full on Magic Show all the time back in the day. That was what I was doing. And so I was filming there, and I interviewed Olivier Ruel. And at one point, I asked him, if he had ran the cheats. Because there was the very infamous, he had cheated during Grand Prix and whatever.
Uh-oh.
And that was...
Oh, boy.
Yeah, well, see, now you're... All right, so if I'm already making you cringe, I want you to imagine how it is to be myself. And
This
think
seat
about...
is uncomfortable.
Yeah, we're already uncomfortable, bruh. And so this was... So I'm pretty sure this one probably tops the whole dropping out of a Grand Prix early. No, this one was in front of the world. I wasn't trying to embarrass the man. I was trying to be like, funny, like, quirky, whatever. Like, I don't know what the hell exactly I was trying to be other than totally incorrect. And
Right.
And I just... And I
I've had a couple.
And I've later got called on it, so it's not like, it's one of those things that, when somebody gives you an outside perspective, like, dude, what the hell were you doing? I was like, oh my God.
Right.
That was a horrible thing, and I wish I had never brought it up. It was really, the man was being honored. It should have been all positive and all great, and that was not good.
Not a good forum.
I did not feel good about that one.
But
it's pretty rough. Not a positive. All right, so let's round ourselves out here to the finisher on that note.
Yeah.
This weekend is the first StarCityGames.com Invitational of 2016 and is happening in Columbus, Ohio. And as you know, the winner of this weekend's Invitational gets their own token. So if you somehow won an Invitational, what kind of token would you be, Aaron?
Well, I think I may have to betray my nature a little bit and choose a 3/1 red elemental token because Chandra is my homegirl and we redheads have to stick together.
Nice.
Sure.
Ruben?
Well, I'm super stoked to get myself made into a goat token, because as you guys know, I am the goat, in that I am white with a beard and no power.
And you're the greatest of all time.
Also that.
Also greatest of all
Kobe.
time. Very nice.
Shout out to Kobe.
All right. Well, I think I'd be a 2/2 Drake token because I started from the bottom and now we here. You know what I'm saying?
Well played.
I keep it directly from the streets, bro.
Yeah.
All right.
You could also say that about your hairline too. Just
Started from the bottom and now we're bare.
it was a reach. They can't all be good. Come on.
We could have a token with reach.
Wow. All right, ladies and gentlemen. And with that, we end another episode of Magic Mics. Aaron, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Ruben, thank you very much for
thank
joining us.
you.
I appreciate you. Well, I appreciate you, buddy. You guys are great. And so with that, we go to our final slide. We thank you guys very much for watching another episode of Magic Mics. We hope you enjoyed hanging out with us here to discuss all things Magic. I want to thank my co-hosts once again, you guys, for watching. Hope you join us and support us at patreon.com/magicmics. Visit our website at magicmicspodcast.com. That exists thanks to our Patreon supporters. Or follow, like, favorite, tweet, share, do everything social that tells people that we exist. Catch us online at twitch.tv/magicmics, on Twitter at magicmicscast, on Reddit at reddit.com/r/magicmics, and on Facebook at facebook.com/magicmics. patreon.com/magicmics. Talk to us privately at magicmikespodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at magicmikespodcast.libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes, or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.